here we are for another evening of classic fairy tales by Hans Christian Andersen. Today we will be reading, there we go, The Buckwheat. As you can see, it is 1.5 pages, very short one today, to round out the week. I personally am very thankful. It has been a long week, and I will very gratefully take a short story today, a shorter than usual. I'm very curious to see what a storyteller can achieve with such a small amount of sentences, and I hope you are too. So, without further ado, like for the rhyme, let us begin. The Buckwheat. When you pass by a field of buckwheat after a thunderstorm, you will often find it looking blackened and singed, as if a flame of fire had swept over it. Peasants say, "The lightning has caused this." But why did the lightning blacken the buckwheat? I will tell you what I heard from the sparrow, who was told by an old willow tree standing near a field of buckwheat. I suppose that is how you know they know about buckwheats. They hang around them. It was a large, imposing old willow tree, although somewhat crippled by old age and split in the middle. Grass and a bramble brush grew in the cleft. The tree was bending down its branches so that they nearly crouched. No, I'm sorry. It was bending down its branches so that they nearly touched the ground, hanging down like long green hair. On all the neighboring fields grew corn, not only rye and barley, but also oats, splendid oats indeed, which look, when they are ripe, like many little yellow canary birds on a branch. The corn was lovely to look at, and the fuller the ears were, the lower they were hanging down. I'm sorry. How is this sentence? The corn was lovely to look at, and the fuller the ears were, the lower they were hanging down, as if in godly humility. Close by, right opposite to the old willow tree, was also a field of buckwheat. The buckwheat did not bend down like the other corn, but stood proudly and stiffly upright. I am certainly as well off as the corn," it said. "I am in addition to this much better looking. My flowers are as beautiful as the blossoms of the apple tree. It must be a pleasure to look at me and my companions. Do you know anything more magnificent than we are, old willow tree?" The willow tree nodded its head, as if it wished to say, "Yes, certainly I do." The buckwheat spread, full of pride, its leaves and said, "This stupid old tree! It is so old that grass is growing out of its trunk." Soon a heavy thunderstorm arose. All the flowers in the field folded their leaves or bowed their little heads down, while the storm passed over them. But the buckwheat remained proudly standing upright. "Bend your head, as we do," said the flowers. "Why should I?" asked the buckwheat. "Bend your head as we do," said the corn. "The angel of the storm is approaching. His wings reach from the clouds down to the ground. He will cut you in two, ere you can cry for mercy." "But I refuse to bend my head," said the buckwheat. "Close up your flowers and bend down your leaves," cried the old willow tree. "Do not look up at the lightning when it tears the clouds. Even mankind can't do that. For while a flash of lightning lasts, one can look into heaven, and that dazzles even mankind. What would then happen to us, the plants of the earth, which are so greatly inferior to men, if we dare do so?" Why, greatly inferior, said the buckwheat. If you cannot give a better reason, I will look up into heaven. And its boundless pride and presumption, it did look up. Suddenly came a flash of lightning that was so strong that it seemed for a moment as if the whole world was in flames. When the storm had abated, the flowers and the corn stood refreshed by the rain in the pure, still air, but the buckwheat was burned by the lightning and had become a dead, useless weed. The wind moved the branches of the old willow tree so that large drops of water fell down from its green leaves, as if the tree was weeping. And the sparrows asked it, "Why do you cry? Blessings are showered upon us all. Look how the sun shines and how the clouds sail on. Do you not smell the sweet fragrance of flowers and bushes? Why do you cry, old willow tree?" Then the willow tree told them of the pride of the buckwheat, of its presumption, and the punishment which had to suffer. I, who have told you this story, have heard it from the sparrows. They related it to me one night when I had asked them for a tale. Well, I thought they would actually. How big is the? Ah, that is a really pretty picture. How big is the next one? Should I read the next one? 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, several pages. All right, no, we'll leave it for another day. Yeah, this story really seemed to me. My impression would be that the writer, the storyteller, was phoning it in. I'll leave this picture here. It's really pretty. I'll change the. There we go. Now in discussion, the buckwheat, like the 2-minute discussion to say that. Well, it really did seem to me like the storyteller was just phoning it in. Let's talk about a hubris being stricken down with due punishment. You know, the buckwheat was very vainglorious, very vain, very proud of itself and all its characteristics, thought itself superior to everything around them, even man. I found it interesting. I will say it is interesting for the writer to put down that man is superior to plants. That is really, really not something you would see written nowadays, unless the writer was specifically trying to be edgy or writing the dialogue for a villain. But as in stating it as a matter of fact truth of the story, I don't see it being written nowadays. So, but it's not that I like it, it's just something interesting to point out. Mostly, the writer knows how to write, the descriptions are pretty, poetic narration here and there. I like the way it says, the story was told to the willow tree told to the sparrows, the way that those sentences flow is pretty well done. The first one comes right at the right time, and the last one to wrap up the story, because you get the introduction, kind of the theme of the story, the presentation rather, then the sentence, that sentence, "I heard a story from blah 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 blah," comes right as we're actually starting the story, and then it comes at the end. That part is pretty well done. But all in all, it's not a daisy. And that will be it. Just a really quick stream, really quick thoughts, really quick reads. The next story will take longer. I like the setup more. I can talk about that since got time to kill. I like the setup more. The camera is no longer strapped to my collar, but rather in a funny chair setup, so that it can be more fixed, better fixed. But I still have to figure out how to. I haven't figured out the perfect positioning. You can see I'm struggling to have the book in frame, and I have a problem with lighting as well. The lighting, I don't know if I'll ever find a perfect solution in this place, but the position I can probably do. But I'm rambling. I really like these stories. I like how well written they are, and there's always at least a little tidbit to remind me of how classic, I guess, how old, how they were written in a different era, in a different age, where people had different mindsets, you know, where people could actually write God and heaven with a capitalized H into mainstream story, you know, in mainstream storytelling, people could actually do that without being derisive. Because of course you can do that nowadays, but you usually have to be derisive or sarcastic, ironic, etc. But otherwise, people just avoid it. It's a very, very non-word. It has become, which I don't like particularly, but it is what it is. I am just telling it, telling you what my impression is, and every story so far has really. I mean, I'm looking at the first page, and there's like a Chinaman. There's nothing wrong about that word, but again, it's a term that I doubt I would very hardly very. I doubt I would find in the mainstream book nowadays. So I mean, so it's cool to have this kind of contrast. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm going to think about how best to improve this streams. I might start reading. I might start reading more. I might have more of a time schedule than a story schedule, because I decided to do a story a day. But this has been my first week, and every day the stories have been pretty different in length. This one was super small. The first one was pretty large. The Emperor's New Clothes was pretty long. Nightingale is going to be pretty long. I might start doing a fixed hour, and we will just read as many stories as we can for 40 minutes and then do discussions. Probably so. Although I want to do a discussion right after I read. I don't want to read in a bulk and then discuss in bulk. That's not good. So I'll think about it. Catch you later, alligators. And remember, classic fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen. You can find this book on Amazon. It's really pretty, and you can read the original version of a lot of fairy tales that you can only nowadays that you will only see in some cartoons and stuff, reimagined versions of them all. This is not a book that has Red Riding Hood, for example, or I'm blanking. But this is the book that has the Ice Queen, which Frozen is based off of, with nothing to do with the original story. I almost bet. I haven't read it, but I'm pretty sure it won't have anything to do. But also Rapunzel is also here. So I'm looking forward to reading the original version of these stories that I've seen over and over again in their, I wouldn't say bastardized, but reimagined. Let's use that word. It's a friendly word. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to those stories. And meanwhile, I'm finding out these new stories, these completely stories that I haven't read, and I won't hesitate to say when I don't like them. This one, the Buckwheat. It's not worth it. It's not worth the read. If I wrote all of these stories, the Buckwheat would be something I had written, but I wouldn't include in the book. I'll leave it at that. All right. Seriously, take care. Bye bye.